Welcome back for the second part of One Man's Faith today. And we're now going to jump into a study we started last week on Hebrews. So let's go to the book of Hebrews. Book of Hebrews is just before James, just after Philemon, Titus, Philemon, Hebrews. So it's what, about 2/3 of the way through the New Testament? It's got 13 chapters. And it's hard to tell whether it's really a letter or whether it's a sermon. Some believe that it is a sermon, and we started to look at that last week. And so in Hebrews 1, it tells us that in the last days, God has spoken to us through his Son, all right? And that Jesus is the radiance of his glory, it says in verse 3, and the exact representation of his nature. Do you want to see God? Look at Jesus. If you want to know how God is, what his character is, look at Jesus. Jesus is the exact representation of his nature. And that's something that we need to grasp hold of in our minds. If we want to see who God is, we look at Jesus. And we'll see God's nature. Now, the other thing we can do is go over to 1 John, toward the end of the book, and it says, God is love. So you want to know what God is? God is love. Now, which means we got to be careful with what we hear people say or what we think when we look at the Old Testament and see where it looks like God is vindictive and will come after you. No. If you break his law, yes. Just as if you break the law here in Pahrump, you're going to end up in jail. Does that mean that the sheriff is vindictive and out to get you? No. It doesn't. It's the same way with God. We have this false way of looking at God. And we try and use that as our excuse to not have to worship him. Hey, that's fine. If that's the way you want to be, that's between you and God when you get there. You're not going to stand before the throne and tell God, I didn't like the way you acted. As a matter of fact, there's an indication that you're not going to be able to do anything but stand there and listen. Okay? How Jesus is not an angel. He's above the angels. All right? He is over the angels. He is the Son of God. And so he is totally different from the angelic realm. Okay? We even have a quote, I believe it's in this chapter. Oh, it must be in chapter 2. Sorry, that's in chapter 2. Okay, but we have in chapter 2, I'll just jump over there. It says in verse 7 of chapter 2, you who have made him a little lower than the angels. That's what it says here. And we looked at that last week. If you compare this with where it comes from, which is Psalm 8, it says a little bit lower than God. And the actual word in Psalm 8 is Elohim. We looked at that last week, okay? So it's really saying that he has made man a little lower. Now, another interesting point out of chapter 1, as a review, is there are 6 quotes from the Old Testament in chapter 1. All of them come out of the Psalms. And that's interesting because we normally look at the Psalms as being a hymn book, and it's more than that. There is prophecy. There are statutes and ordinances kind of given to us through there, and historical points. And every quote in Hebrews 1 and a lot of the other quotes throughout Hebrews are from the Psalms, which makes it very interesting and something we need to consider when we look at the book of Psalms. Now, we go to chapter 2. Chapter 2 is a comparison of Jesus and man. Okay? Chapter 1 was Jesus and the angels. Now we're getting to Jesus and man, and how Jesus became man. And the quote here is from, as I said before, Psalm 8. What is man that you remember him? Or the Son of Man that you are concerned about him? You have made him for a little while lower than the angels, Hebrews says. The actual Psalm says a little bit lower than God. You have crowned him with glory and honor and have appointed him over the works of your hands. You have put all things in subjection under his feet. And that psalm shows who we are and that Jesus became. Now, why did Jesus have to become a man? Jesus couldn't come to earth as God and fulfill the requirements of the law. You see, if you'll remember and go back to Genesis chapter 1, I think verse 26. Well, matter of fact, let's just do that real quick. I've covered this before, but just to refresh our memories, if we go back to chapter 1, when God made man, he verse 28, excuse me, not 26, 28. Oh, no, it is 26, excuse me, it is 26. And God said, let us make man in our image according to our likeness, and let them, man, rule over all the earth. Rule over all the earth. Let's see. And let him rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. Okay? God said, man will do this. Man will be in charge of the earth. Okay? He gave us the dominion over, as a matter of fact, in 28, it repeats it. And God blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply. So God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, rule over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the sky and over every living thing that moves on the earth. Now, God did not take that away. You will not find anywhere where God took that away. You know what we do? We say, oh, well, we just assume God took. How does God rule? By getting people to agree with him. Why do things seem to be going astray? How many people are in church versus how many people are in the world? That's one of the ways of looking at this. How do we get God back into our government and into the life of America? By getting more people and getting those who are already Christians to agree with him and his word. You see, even we don't totally agree as Christians. There are people who are in church and they're living together and not married. That's a violation of God's law, and we allow it. There are people in the church who have homosexual lifestyles. That is totally against God's word, and they are abominations to God. So how can anything go straight if even the church is succumbing to this stuff? You see, we've got to change. We've got to bring the church back to being what the church is. And we're the ones that stand and say, God is the ruler. He's the one over all. We're in control. He's in charge. But he has charge by us having control. That makes sense. Think about that, because we got to take a break. So that'll give you a couple of minutes to mull over that. Get that cup of coffee. I'll be right back.